A woman is diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Her doctor tells her to stay positive. Positive thinking helps you heal, they say. She visualizes her tumors shrinking. She affirms her recovery daily. She refuses to acknowledge fear. 18 months later, she's dead. And in her final weeks, she blamed herself. I must not have been positive enough. Positive thinking didn't cause her death, but it shaped how she understood it. This isn't a story about failure. It's a story about what positive thinking actually costs, and why the most dangerous thing about toxic positivity isn't that it doesn't work, it's that it makes suffering worse. I've reviewed over 30 peer-reviewed studies on positive psychology, emotional regulation, and optimism bias published over the past decade. Across different populations and contexts, a consistent pattern emerges, one that directly contradicts the promises of the multi-billion-dollar positive thinking industry. For certain people, in certain situations, positive thinking doesn't merely fail to help, it actively worsens psychological and sometimes physical well-being. To understand why, we have to look at what happens in the brain when someone is told to stay positive while experiencing real, unavoidable suffering. The technical term is emotional suppression. Here's the mechanism. You experience fear, grief, anger, or despair, normal emotional responses to serious threat or loss. Then you're instructed to focus on gratitude, hope, or optimism instead. So you comply. You push the unwanted emotion down and redirect attention towards something more acceptable. This feels constructive. You're doing something. You're not collapsing. From the outside, it even looks resilient. But physiologically, nothing has resolved. Research shows that suppressed emotions remain active in the body. Heart rate stays elevated. Cortisol continues circulating. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, remains engaged. Psychologist James Gross at Stanford demonstrated this repeatedly. Participants instructed to suppress emotion showed higher cardiovascular strain and poorer stress recovery than those allowed to acknowledge what they felt. Memory processing also suffered. Emotional experiences became fragmented rather than integrated. In other words, the emotion doesn't disappear, it goes underground. Now add forced positivity. You're no longer just hiding fear, you're required to perform happiness you don't feel. This creates emotional labor, sustained effort to display an internal state that contradicts reality. Imagine grieving a parent. You're devastated. Someone says, "At least they lived a long life. Focus on the good memories." So you smile. You say you're okay. You post gratitude online. Outwardly, you're coping. Privately, you're unraveling. Now grief is joined by shame. You're not just sad, you're sad incorrectly. You're failing at emotional regulation. Psychologists call this meta-emotion, emotion about emotion, feeling guilty for feeling sad, anxious about being anxious. Research by June Gruber shows that people who place the highest value on happiness often experience more depression. The pressure to feel good creates a gap between expected emotion and lived emotion. That gap produces suffering. Positive thinking doesn't eliminate pain. It turns pain into self-blame for having pain at all. Before this is misunderstood, a critical distinction. Hope is not the problem. Hope says, I don't know what will happen, but I can cope. Rigid positive thinking says, if I think correctly, nothing bad will happen. That belief creates a specific cognitive distortion known as optimism bias. Optimism bias is the tendency to believe negative outcomes happen to other people, not you. It inflates perceived control and minimizes risk. Positive thinking culture amplifies this bias aggressively. If you believe it, you can achieve it. Your thoughts create your reality. The universe responds to your vibration. These aren't metaphors, they are causal claims, and they are false. When people believe thoughts control outcomes, behavior changes in predictable ways. Preparation decreases, risk assessment weakens, contingency planning disappears. Cancer researcher James Coyne documented this in oncology patients. Those pressured to maintain positivity experienced worse psychological outcomes than patients permitted to express fear and sadness. When illness progressed, many internalized responsibility. I didn't believe hard enough. I let negativity in. This is my fault. The disease caused pain. Positive thinking added moral failure. This pattern repeats outside medicine. Someone loses a job. They're told to stay positive. Something better is coming. So they delay job searching. They avoid financial planning. They trust optimism instead of strategy. Months pass, savings shrink, anxiety escalates. Now, they're not just unemployed, they believe they manifested unemployment through insufficient positivity. Psychologist Gabrielle Oettingen explains why. Her research shows that people who indulge in positive fantasy about future success exert less effort and achieve worse outcomes than those who imagine both success and obstacles. She calls the effective approach mental contrasting, holding hope and difficulty simultaneously. Pure positive thinking produces passivity. If thoughts control reality, action feels optional. This is the trap. Positive thinking promises empowerment, but often produces learned helplessness, followed by self-blame when reality refuses to cooperate. So what actually helps when positive thinking fails? Not pessimism, not negativity, and not pretending things are fine. The alternative is radical acceptance. Radical acceptance doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean surrender. It means ending the argument with reality. When something painful happens, the mind has two paths. Resistance, this shouldn't be happening. If I were better, smarter, more positive, this wouldn't be happening. Acceptance, this is happening. I don't like it. It hurts, and now I decide how to respond. Psychologist Marsha Linehan developed this framework in dialectical behavior therapy. She found that acceptance doesn't remove pain, but it dramatically reduces suffering. Pain is the event itself. Suffering is the mental resistance layered on top. You can't always control pain. You can control how much you amplify it. Consider chronic illness. The symptoms are real. The limitations are real. Positive thinking says, if I believe hard enough, I'll cure this. When symptoms persist, shame follows. Acceptance says, this is real. I didn't cause it with my thoughts. I can still build meaning within these constraints. Same pain, less suffering. Acceptance sounds like this in practice. I hate this, and I'm still going to make the appointment, send the email, ask for help. Research by Kristen Neff on self-compassion supports this. Treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer a struggling friend predicts better mental health outcomes than self-esteem or forced optimism. Because self-compassion doesn't require control over outcomes, only honesty and humanity. This applies to grief, illness, aging, loss, and failure, the realities positive thinking claims you can transcend through belief. You can't, but you can stop punishing yourself for being human. When something bad happens, you're allowed to feel bad. Emotion is not evidence of failure, it's evidence of being alive. Positive thinking sells hope. Radical acceptance offers something stronger, the ability to face reality without self-betrayal, without shame, and without the fantasy that suffering is a personal moral flaw. That's the real work, not pretending everything is fine, but being kind to yourself when it isn't.